Velnara stood before the massive viewing window of the research vessel Silent Observer, watching the blue and green planet grow larger on the screen. Her silver skin reflected the dim lights of the observation deck as she reviewed the data tablet in her three-fingered hands. Another assignment, another species to study and catalog for the Galactic Confederation. The Catherians were known throughout the galaxy as the perfect observers. They felt no strong emotions that might cloud their judgment. They formed no attachments that might bias their reports. For 200 years, Velnara had studied 17 different species across the galaxy, from the warrior-like Draknari who solved every problem with violence, to the peaceful Zenthari who spent their entire lives in meditation. Each time, she had maintained perfect scientific distance. She watched, she recorded, she analyzed, and she moved on. That was the Catherian way. Her current assignment seemed routine enough. The humans of Earth had only recently made contact with the Confederation 5 years ago. They were still considered a minor species barely worth detailed study. But the Confederation wanted to understand how they organized themselves before allowing them full membership privileges. Subject species displays typical mammalian social structures. Velnara read aloud from her preliminary notes. Hierarchical organization with resource-sharing behaviors consistent with pack-hunting evolutionary background. Estimated study duration, 6 months. The Silent Observer's captain, another Catherian named Torvin, appeared beside her at the viewing window. His pale blue eyes showed the same calm detachment that all their species maintained. The humans have agreed to host you at their research station, he said in their musical language. They call it Harmony Base. It sits on the northern continent of their colony world, Kepler 438b. Velnara nodded. Have they been told my true purpose? No. They believe you are here for cultural exchange. They seemed pleased about the opportunity to share their knowledge with other species. This surprised Velnara slightly. Most species were more cautious when first contacted by the Confederation. They asked questions about technology, about trade, agreements about military protection. The humans seemed more interested in making friends. Primitive thinking, she murmured, making a note on her tablet. Lack of strategic awareness typical of newly contacted species. The transport shuttle carried Velnara down through the planet's atmosphere. The world below looked remarkably similar to the human homeworld of Earth, with vast oceans and green land masses. The humans had chosen well for their first major colony. Harmony Base appeared on the horizon as a collection of white and silver buildings, connected by covered walkways. Solar collectors and communication dishes dotted the rooftops. Gardens and small parks were scattered between the structures. It looked more like a small town than a military installation. The shuttle landed on a marked pad near the main building. As Velnara gathered her few belongings, she could see humans approaching. Across the landing field, 3 of them walked together, their faces showing expressions of curiosity and welcome. The tallest human stepped forward as she descended from the shuttle. He was male with dark hair and kind eyes. His clothing marked him as someone of authority, but he wore no weapons and showed no signs of aggression. Welcome to Harmony Base, he said in accented galactic standard. I am Commander Dongwook Kim. This is our chief scientist, Dr. Hai-Jin Park, and our chief engineer, Tae-Min Lee. Dr. Park was a woman with shoulder-length black hair and bright, intelligent eyes. She carried a data pad similar to Velnara's, though more primitive in design. Tae-Min Lee was younger than the other 2, with calloused hands that spoke of someone who worked with tools and machinery. I am Velnara of the Catherian Research Division, she replied formally. I thank you for accepting my presence here. We're honored to have you, Dr. Park said, and her voice carried genuine warmth. We've prepared quarters for you near the ICAO observation deck. We thought you might enjoy the view of the sunrise over the eastern mountains. Another surprise. They had considered her comfort, not just her basic needs. Velnara made another mental note about unexpected hospitality behaviors. As they walked toward the main buildings, Commander Kim pointed out various facilities. Our population here is about 400 people. We have families as well as researchers and technical staff. Dr. Choi runs our medical center. Wu Jinhan manages communications with Earth and other colonies, and Unji Kang coordinates our civilian services. What is the purpose of this facility? Velnara asked. Research, primarily, Dr. Park answered. We study the local ecosystem, test new agricultural techniques, and serve as a communications hub for this sector. But really, we're learning how to build a community far from Earth. They passed a central courtyard where human children were playing some kind of game with a round ball. Adults sat on benches nearby, talking and laughing. The scene reminded Velnara of similar gathering behaviors she had observed in pack-oriented species. But there was something different here. The adults watching the children were not all parents. Some appeared to have no biological connection to the young ones, yet they showed the same protective attention. Those children belonged to various families, Taman explained, noticing her observation. But we all look after them. They're our future out here. Velnara's quarters were indeed near the observation deck, with large windows facing the eastern mountains. The room was simple but comfortable, with furniture sized appropriately for her slightly smaller frame. On the desk, someone had placed a small flowering plant in a ceramic pot. Dr. Choi thought you might enjoy having something living in your room, Commander Kim said. It's native to this world. The flowers change color based on the mineral content in the soil. This was unnecessary, Velnara said, though she found herself oddly pleased by the gesture. Many things we do are unnecessary, Dr. Park said with a smile. That doesn't make them less important. That evening, Velnara was invited to join the humans for their communal meal in the main dining hall. She had expected to eat alone and observe from a distance, but Commander Kim had insisted she experience their social customs firsthand. The dining hall buzzed with conversation in several different human languages, though everyone switched to Galactic Standard when addressing her. Children ran between tables while adults discussed their work, their families, and their plans for the coming days. Dr. Choi, the medical officer, was a woman with graying hair and gentle hands. She asked Velnara about Catherian biology and medicine, with genuine scientific curiosity. Wu Jinhan, the communications specialist, wanted to know about other species in the Confederation and what they were like. Hyunji Kang, who coordinated civilian services, asked about Catherian art and culture. Their questions showed no fear, no suspicion, and no attempt to gain strategic advantage. They simply wanted to know about her and her people. This level of open curiosity was highly unusual in Velnara's experience. As the evening progressed, she watched the humans interact with each other. Parents disciplined children who were not their own. Adults shared food without being asked. When an older man began choking on his meal, 3 people immediately moved to help him, including Dr. Choi, who was sitting at a completely different table. By the end of her first day, Velnara had filled several pages of her data tablet with observations. The humans showed standard pack behaviors, hierarchy, resource sharing, and group protection, but they also displayed cooperation patterns that extended well beyond family or tribal units. They treated total strangers, including herself, as potential friends rather than threats. Lying in her comfortable bed that first night, Velnara looked at the flowering plant on her desk. In the moonlight filtering through her window, the petals had shifted from blue to deep purple. Beautiful and unnecessary, just as Dr. Park had said. She made one final note before sleep. Subjects show unusual hospitality toward outsiders. Possible evolutionary advantage in resource-rich environment. Further observation required to determine if behavior is genuine or strategic deception. Outside her window, the eastern mountains waited for tomorrow's sunrise. 3 weeks into her observation period, Velnara had settled into a routine at Harmony Base. Every morning she would walk through the facility, taking notes on human behavior patterns. Every evening she would compile her observations and send reports back to the Catherian Research Division. So far, the humans were proving to be exactly what she had expected. They formed social groups, shared resources within those groups, and showed typical territorial behaviors around their living spaces. Nothing unusual for a pack-oriented species. Then Taemin Lee changed everything. Velnara was reviewing atmospheric readings in the environmental lab when she heard raised voices from the engineering section. Through the connecting doorway, she could see Tae-min standing before a massive diagnostic screen covered in red warning indicators. "How long do we have?" Commander Kim asked, his voice tight with concern. Tae-min ran his hands through his dark hair, leaving it disheveled. "The atmospheric processor has a critical fault in the primary circulation system. If it fails completely, we lose life support for the entire base, maybe 3 weeks before the air becomes unbreathable." Dr. Park leaned over the console, studying the readouts. "Can we repair it?" "Yes, but it will take constant work. Someone needs to be in the maintenance tunnels 18 hours a day, replacing components as they wear out. The system is falling apart faster than normal repair schedules can handle." Velnara expected to see the humans begin assigning this dangerous work to lower-ranking personnel, or rotating the burden among many workers. That was how most species handled unpleasant but necessary tasks. Instead, Tae-min straightened his shoulders and looked directly at Commander Kim. "I'll do it. I know these systems better than anyone else." "Tae-min, that's 3 times your normal work schedule," Dr. Park protested. "You'll make yourself sick. Better me sick than all of us dead," he replied simply. Commander Kim shook his head. "We can't ask you to do this alone." "You're not asking. I'm volunteering." Velnara watched with growing confusion as Tae-min began working 18-hour shifts in the cramped, hot maintenance tunnels beneath the base. He emerged each evening covered in grease and exhaustion, ate a quick meal, slept for 6 hours, then returned to the tunnels. According to her observations, Tae-min gained nothing from this behavior. He was not the highest-ranking engineer. He was not seeking promotion or special status. He was not even trying to impress a potential mate. He was simply ensuring the survival of his community at great personal cost. This made no sense according to standard behavioral models. A week later, Velnara discovered another puzzle. Dr. So-young Choi had been spending her off-duty hours in private meetings with Yoonji Kang, the civilian coordinator. Velnara's curiosity led her to observe one of these sessions from the corridor outside Dr. Choi's office. "The nightmares are getting worse," Yoonji was saying, her voice shaky. "Sometimes I wake up and forget where I am. For a moment, I think, I'm still on Earth, and then I remember we're light years away from home." Dr. Choi's voice was gentle and patient. "That's normal, Yoonji. Many colonists experience anxiety about the distance from Earth. You're not weak or broken for feeling this way. But I'm supposed to coordinate civilian services. How can I help other people when I can't even handle my own fears? Because helping others often helps us handle our own problems. And because admitting fear takes more courage than pretending it doesn't exist." Velnara realized she was witnessing what humans called therapy. Dr. Choi was providing psychological support to Yoonji, spending her personal time to help someone work through emotional difficulties. Again, the medical officer gained nothing tangible from this behavior. Yoonji was not family. She was not even under Dr. Choi's direct authority. Yet the sessions continued every evening for 2 weeks, until Yoonji's nightmares decreased and her confidence returned. The third incident that confused Velnara happened during a supply shortage. A transport from Earth had been delayed, leaving the base with reduced food rations for an indefinite period. Commander Kim had announced that everyone would receive smaller meals until the next shipment arrived. Velnara expected to see hoarding behaviors, competition for resources, or at least grumbling about the reduced portions. Instead, she witnessed something that defied her understanding of survival instincts. Woo Jin Han, the communications specialist, approached maintenance worker Hyun-soo Nam during the evening meal. Hyun-soo was one of the newer arrivals at the base, not yet fully integrated into the social groups. He was also performing physically demanding repair work that required more calories than desk jobs. "Here," Woo Jin said, sliding half of his food portion onto Hyun-soo's plate. "You need this more than I do." Hyun-soo looked shocked. "I can't take your food. You'll go hungry." Woo Jin smiled and patted his stomach. "I could stand to lose a few pounds anyway. Besides, you're keeping our power systems running. That benefits all of us." But Velnara had observed Woo Jin's eating habits. He was not overweight. He was not trying to impress Hyun-soo for any social advantage. He was simply giving away food he needed to someone who needed it more. This pattern repeated throughout the dining hall. Parents gave portions to other people's children. Office workers shared with manual laborers. Dr. Park even offered part of her meal to Velnara, who had her own separate food supplies. "Why do you do this?" Velnara asked Dr. Park directly. The scientist looked confused by the question. "Do what?" "Share resources with individuals who provide no benefit to you. Risk your own welfare for others who are not family members. Taemin is endangering his health for the community." Dr. Choi spends her free time helping Yoonji with personal problems. Woo-jin gives away food he needs. Dr. Park considered this for a moment, then smiled. "We look out for each other. That's just what people do." "But why? What do you gain?" "We gain a community worth living in," Dr. Park replied. "We gain the knowledge that if we ever need help, others will be there for us too. We gain the satisfaction of knowing we're making life better for people we care about." "But you barely know some of these people." "That doesn't matter. They're here with us, trying to build something good. That makes them worth caring about." Velnara returned to her quarters that evening deeply troubled by these observations. She had studied 17 species across the galaxy. Some were cooperative within family groups. Others formed larger tribal alliances. A few even showed limited altruism toward non-relatives under specific circumstances. But she had never seen this level of consistent self-sacrifice for the benefit of near strangers. Humans seemed to operate on the assumption that helping others was simply the right thing to do, regardless of personal cost or benefit. She reviewed her notes from the past month, looking for signs of deception or hidden motives. Perhaps the humans were presenting a false image to impress their alien observer. Perhaps their true nature would emerge under greater stress. Her preliminary report to the Cytherian Research Division reflected her growing suspicion. Human subjects display cooperation patterns that exceed normal evolutionary parameters. Possible explanations include deliberate deception to influence observer opinions, cultural programming that overrides individual survival instincts, or genetic anomalies that produce irrational altruistic behavior. Recommend extended observation period to determine true nature of species. But late at night, looking at the flowering plant that still sat on her desk, Velnara wondered if she was missing something important. The plant had continued changing colors with the phases of the moon, creating beauty for no practical purpose. Just like the humans seemed to create kindness for no logical reason. Maybe the question wasn't why the humans acted this way. Maybe the question was why other species didn't. Outside her window, the lights of Harmony Base twinkled in the darkness. Somewhere in those buildings, Taemin was working through another long night in the maintenance tunnels. Dr. Choi was probably checking on patients who couldn't sleep. Woo Jin was monitoring communications in case Earth tried to contact them, all of them choosing to serve their community when they could have chosen to serve only themselves. For the first time in her long career, Velnara began to suspect that her scientific detachment might be preventing her from understanding the most important thing about her subjects. Maybe some things could only be understood from the inside. 6 months after Velnara's arrival at Harmony Base, everything changed in the span of a single morning. She was reviewing behavioral data in her quarters when the emergency alarm began sounding throughout the base. The piercing tone was followed by Commander Kim's voice over the communication system. "All personnel report to the main assembly hall immediately. This is not a drill." Velnara followed the stream of humans hurrying through the corridors. Their faces showed concern but not panic. Parents carried young children while older kids walked beside them, asking quiet questions that received equally quiet reassurances. The assembly hall filled quickly with the base's 400 residents. Commander Kim stood on the raised platform at the front, his expression grim. Dr. Park stood beside him, along with the other department heads. Behind them, a large display screen showed a three-dimensional star map with a massive red object moving through space. "I'll give you the facts straight," Commander Kim began. "Long-range sensors have detected a void swarm approaching our system. For those who aren't familiar, a void swarm is a destructive force that consumes everything in its path. Planets, space stations, Entire star systems. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Velnara had heard of void swarms from Confederation reports. They appeared randomly throughout the galaxy, destroyed everything they encountered, then disappeared, back into deep space. No one knew what they were or where they came from. The swarm will reach our system in 18 days, Dr. Park added. The Confederation fleet is 3 weeks away. Too late to help us. Commander Kim gestured to the display. Evacuation ships are being dispatched from other systems. They can reach us in 16 days, but there's a problem. The display changed to show transport capacity calculations. The numbers were clear and devastating. The evacuation ships can carry approximately half of the total population from all research stations on this planet. Commander Kim continued. That means roughly 200 people from Harmony Base can be saved. The hall fell silent. Velnara watched the faces around her, expecting to see the panic and desperation that normally emerged when a species faced extinction. Instead, she saw determination. Woman near the front raised her hand. How do we decide who goes? Lottery system, Commander Kim replied. Names drawn randomly from the entire population. But there are exceptions. He gestured to Dr. Park, who stepped forward. We've been working on a theoretical possibility. A way to create an artificial gravity well that might deflect the swarm's trajectory away from our system. Might? Someone called out. The science is untested, Dr. Park admitted. We would need to coordinate all 12 research stations on the planet, turning each facility into a component of a massive gravity manipulation device. The power requirements would push our reactors beyond safe limits. The margin for error is essentially zero. Taemin raised his voice from the back of the room. What are the chances of success? Dr. Park hesitated. Honestly, maybe 10%, probably less. And if we try this plan, anyone who stays to implement it will almost certainly die whether we succeed or fail. Velnara expected the humans to reject this hopeless plan immediately. Any rational species would focus their efforts on ensuring the lottery system gave them the best possible chance of survival. Instead, hands began rising throughout the room. I volunteer to stay, called out Dr. Choi. Me too, said Wu Jin from near the front. Count me in, added Yunji. Within minutes, over half the people in the room had volunteered to remain behind and attempt the impossible plan. Parents volunteered while holding their children. Elderly researchers raised their hands alongside young technicians. Commander Kim raised his hands for quiet. I appreciate everyone's courage, but we need to think about this carefully. Families should stay together, whether they go or stay. We need specific skills for the gravity well plan, and we need to give people time to consider their decision. But Velnara could see that most humans had already decided. They were not choosing between life and death. They were choosing between abandoning their community and standing with it, regardless of the cost. Over the following 3 days, the lottery was conducted for evacuation positions. True to his word, Commander Kim ensured the process was completely random and fair. But when his own name was drawn, he quietly removed it from the list. Command staff should be the last to leave. Any endangered facility, he explained to Velnara when she questioned this decision, it's not about rank or authority. It's about responsibility. Dr. Park also removed her name from the evacuation list. Someone needs to coordinate the gravity well attempt. I designed the theory, so I'm the logical choice. Taemin never entered the lottery at all. These reactor modifications are insanely dangerous, he told Velnara. I'm the only one who fully understands our power systems. If anyone has a chance of making this work, it's me. By the end of the selection process, 847 humans across all research stations had volunteered to stay behind. They included parents, children, scientists, engineers, teachers, artists, and maintenance workers. They came from every department and every social group. Velnara struggled to understand their logic. You are choosing almost certain death over possible survival. This contradicts every principle of evolutionary behavior. Dr. Park was working late in her laboratory, refining calculations for the gravity well. She looked up from her computer screen with tired but determined eyes. Evolution gave us the ability to think beyond our immediate survival, she said. We can choose to value things more than our own lives. What could be more valuable than life? The lives of people we care about, the future of our communities, the knowledge that we tried to do something good, even when the odds were against us. Dr. Park returned to her calculations. Besides, maybe we're not choosing certain death. Maybe we're choosing uncertain hope. Velnara spent the next several days observing the preparations. The humans worked with focused intensity, but there was no desperation in their efforts. Children played in the courtyards while their parents modified reactor systems. Teachers continued classes even though half their students would be leaving on the evacuation ships. Dr. Choi organized medical supplies and equipment to be distributed to other research stations, sending away resources that Harmony Base might desperately need in the coming days. When Velnara questioned this decision, the doctor smiled sadly. If we succeed, we won't need these supplies, she said. If we fail, we definitely won't need them. But the people at other stations might live long enough to use them effectively. Wu Jin spent his days coordinating communications between all the research facilities, helping them synchronize their efforts. Yunji worked with families, helping them decide whether to stay together or split up for the lottery. Every conversation was filled with tears, but also with pride and determination. As the evacuation ships approached and the void swarm grew larger in the sky, Velnara found herself facing an unexpected choice. The Confederation had contacted her directly, offering immediate evacuation aboard a Cytherian vessel. You are not part of this conflict, the message read. Your scientific value to the Confederation outweighs any benefit from continued observation. Report to evacuation coordinates immediately. But Velnara looked around at the humans preparing for their desperate last stand and realized something had changed inside her. She was no longer just observing their courage. She was feeling it. For the first time in her life, Velnara understood the difference between seeing bravery and being brave. The humans were not fearless. She could see the terror in their eyes when they thought no one was watching. They were terrified of dying, terrified of failing, terrified of leaving their loved ones behind. But they were staying anyway. That night, as the evacuation ships prepared to depart with their precious cargo of 200 Harmony Base residents, Velnara made her decision. She deleted the evacuation message from her communication system and walked to Dr. Park's laboratory. I want to help, she said simply. Dr. Park looked up from her calculations, surprise clear on her face. Velnara, this isn't your fight. Your people can get you to safety. Maybe it wasn't my fight when I arrived here, Velnara replied, but it is now. She thought about the flowering plant in her quarters, still changing colors with the lunar cycles, still beautiful for no practical reason. Besides, she added, maybe some things are worth doing even when they seem pointless. Dr. Park smiled and made room at the computer console. We could use someone with advanced knowledge of gravitational mechanics. As they worked together through the night, Velnara realized she was no longer documenting human behavior. She was participating in, and for the first time in her long life, she understood what the humans meant when they talked about belonging. 12 days before the void swarm would reach their system, Velnara found herself working alongside the humans in ways she had never imagined possible. Her scientific detachment had completely disappeared, replaced by something she was only beginning to understand. Dr. Park's gravity well theory required precise coordination between all 12 research stations scattered across the planet's surface. Each facility would need to modify their fusion reactors to generate controlled gravitational distortions. When activated simultaneously, these distortions would theoretically create a massive gravity well that could deflect the swarm's trajectory. Theoretically. The power calculations are beyond anything these reactors were designed to handle, Taemin explained to Velnara as they stood in Harmony Base's reactor chamber. The massive cylindrical device hummed with contained energy, its surface covered in warning labels and safety protocols. We're essentially turning a power generator into a weapon of physics. Velnara studied the modification plans Taemin had developed. Her advanced understanding of gravitational mechanics allowed her to see flaws in the human calculations, but also possibilities they had missed. The harmonic resonance between stations will create interference patterns, she pointed out. But if we adjust the frequency modulation by 0.3%, those interference patterns might actually amplify the gravitational effect. Taemin's eyes lit up as he reviewed her suggestions. That could increase our chances from 10% to maybe 15%. Still almost impossible odds, Velnara said. But better than they were yesterday, Taemin replied with a grin. That's progress. Working beside him in the confined reactor chamber, Velnara began to understand something important about human nature. They did not need guaranteed success to justify their efforts. They simply needed the possibility of success, however small. In the communications center, Wu Jin coordinated with the other research stations. The technical challenges were staggering. Each facility had different reactor designs, different power outputs, and different technical capabilities. Synchronizing them would require perfect timing and flawless execution. Station 7 reports. They're having trouble with their gravitational field generators, Wu Jin announced during one of their daily planning sessions. Their chief engineer was supposed to be on the evacuation ships, but she volunteered to stay behind. What about Station 4? Dr. Park asked. They lost their primary physicist to the lottery, but their botanist has a background in theoretical physics. She's trying to work out the math. Commander Kim shook his head with something that looked like pride mixed with disbelief. A botanist doing theoretical physics to save the world. Only humans would think that makes sense. Dr. Choi was organizing medical teams across all the stations, preparing for the massive casualties that would likely result from pushing the reactors beyond their safety limits. The work was grim, but necessary. Radiation poisoning, gravitational sickness, reactor explosions, she explained to Velnara as they reviewed medical supplies. We're asking people to stand next to devices that might kill them instantly, and they're volunteering for the assignment. Why do they agree to this? Velnara asked. Dr. Choi paused in her inventory checking. Because someone has to do it. Because their families are on this planet. Because giving up without trying isn't an option for us. She returned to her work, then added quietly, and because sometimes doing the right thing matters more than doing the safe thing. As the days passed, Velnara found herself drawn deeper into the human community. Yoonji asked her to help comfort children who were frightened by the approaching danger. Hyunsu requested her assistance with modifications to the base's power, distribution systems. Even the families who would soon depart on evacuation ships sought her out, thanking her for staying to help their friends and neighbors. You don't have to do this, one mother told her as she prepared to board the evacuation transport with her 2 young children. This isn't your world or your people, but you're staying anyway. That means everything to us. Velnara struggled to find words for the complex emotions she was experiencing. I have learned much from observing your species, she finally said. Now I want to learn what it means to be part of something larger than myself. The night before the evacuation ships departed, Commander Kim called a final meeting of those who would remain behind. The assembly hall was much emptier now, with only 200 humans and 1 Catherian in attendance. Tomorrow, half our community leaves for safety, he began. The day after that, we begin the most dangerous thing any of us has ever attempted. I won't lie to you about our chances. We will probably fail. Most of us will probably die. He paused, looking out over the faces of his people. Scientists, engineers, teachers, maintenance workers, parents, grandparents, young adults barely out of their teens, all choosing to stay for the same impossible plan. But if we succeed, we save not just ourselves, but everyone on this planet. 12 research stations, over 4,800 people, and all the potential futures they represent. Dr. Park stood up from her seat in the front row. I want everyone to understand exactly what we're attempting. We're going to create an artificial gravity well with a mass equivalent to a small moon. The power requirements will push our reactors to 150% of their maximum safe output. The gravitational stresses will be unlike anything any of us has experienced. Taemin raised his hand. What are the specific risks? Reactor overload and explosion. Gravitational shear forces that could literally tear our bodies apart. Radiation exposure that would be fatal within hours. equipment failure at critical moments. The room was quiet as people absorbed this information. Then Dr. Choi stood up. I volunteer to coordinate medical support during the activation sequence. Woo Jin rose from his seat. I'll handle communications between all stations. Yoonji stood. I'll manage civilian coordination and evacuation procedures if something goes wrong. One by one, every person in the room volunteered for specific roles in the plan. They were not volunteering because they thought they would survive. They were volunteering because the plan needed to be attempted, and they were the ones present to attempt it. Velnara found herself standing along with the rest. I will assist with gravitational field calibration and monitoring. Commander Kim nodded to each volunteer. We'll organize into teams based on specialization. Each reactor station needs a primary operator, a backup operator, and a monitoring specialist. Medical teams will be positioned at each facility. Communications teams will maintain contact throughout the activation sequence. As the meeting broke up and people began discussing team assignments, Velnara noticed something remarkable. Despite the grim nature of their task, the humans seemed almost energized by having a plan to follow. They were no longer waiting helplessly for death. They were actively working toward a goal, however unlikely success might be. You look thoughtful, Dr. Park observed as they walked back toward the residential quarters. I am trying to understand how you can face almost certain death with such determination, Velnara replied. In my observations of other species, facing extinction typically produces panic, despair, or violent competition for survival resources. Dr. Park considered this as they walked through the quiet corridors. Most of the base's children had already left with the evacuation ships, and their absence made the facility feel hollow and strange. Maybe it's because we're not just facing death, she said finally. We're facing it together for a purpose we all believe in. That changes everything. How does it change everything? When you're alone and afraid, death feels like the end of everything that matters. When you're with people you care about, working towards something bigger than yourself, death feels like just one possible outcome among many. They reached the junction where their quarters lay in different directions. Dr. Park paused before heading to her room. Besides, she added with a tired but genuine smile, maybe we won't die. Maybe we'll succeed, and tomorrow we'll wake up in a world where impossible things sometimes happen because people choose to make them happen. That night, Velnara lay in her bed looking at the flowering plant on her desk. In the darkness, its petals glowed with a faint bioluminescence she had never noticed before. Another beautiful and unnecessary feature, revealed only when everything else was dark. For the first time since arriving at Harmony Base, Velnara was not thinking about her scientific observations or behavioral analysis. She was thinking about tomorrow and all the people depending on their desperate plan to work. She was thinking about hope, and how humans seemed to carry it with them even into the darkest places. Outside her window, the void swarm was visible, as a dark patch against the stars, growing larger each night. But inside the base, humans continued their preparations with steady determination, and Velnara understood finally that she was no longer observing their courage. She was sharing it. 5 days before the void swarm would reach their system, Velnara received a priority communication from the Kitherian High Command. The message appeared on her personal communication device during the morning briefing, marked with the highest authority codes of her species research analyst Velnara. You are ordered to report immediately to evacuation coordinates. A Kitherian vessel will extract you within 6 hours. This directive overrides all previous assignments. Compliance is mandatory. She stared at the message for a long moment, aware that every human in the briefing room was watching her. Commander Kim paused in his review of the day's preparation schedule. Official business? He asked quietly. My government is ordering me to evacuate, Velnara replied. The room fell silent. After months of working together, she had become an integral part of their community. Her knowledge of gravitational mechanics had improved their chances of success. Her presence had helped bridge the gap between human and alien perspectives. Dr. Park leaned forward in her chair. Will you go? Velnara looked around the room at faces that had become familiar and dear to her. Taimin, exhausted from weeks of reactor modifications but still determined to see the project through. Dr. Choi, organizing medical supplies for injuries she hoped would never occur. Wu Jin, maintaining communications with research stations across the planet. Yunji, coordinating the complex logistics of their desperate plan. She thought about her career as an objective scientific observer. 200 years of studying other species while maintaining perfect emotional distance. The comfortable life waiting for her aboard the Cytherian vessel, where she could return to her role as a detached analyst of alien behavior. Then she thought about the flowering plant in her quarters, still changing colors for no practical reason except that beauty mattered. She thought about humans who sacrificed sleep to help their neighbors, who shared food during shortages, who volunteered for dangerous work because someone needed to do it. Velnara deleted the evacuation order from her communication device. "No," she said simply. "I will not go." Commander Kim nodded as if he had expected no other answer. "Then let's continue with the briefing." But Velnara knew that in that moment, she had made a choice that would change everything about who she was. She was no longer a Cytherian observer studying human behavior. She was a person choosing to stand. With her friends, regardless of the consequences, the final preparations moved forward with desperate urgency. Each research station across the planet had modified their fusion reactors according to the gravity well specifications. Teams of volunteers had trained for weeks to operate equipment that might kill them instantly if something went wrong. The plan required someone at each station to manually coordinate the final activation sequence. They would need to stand directly beside the modified reactors as the gravitational fields built to dangerous levels, making real-time adjustments to ensure all 12 stations activated in perfect synchronization. It was essentially a suicide mission for the coordination teams. Harmony Base. Commander Kim had originally planned to serve as the primary coordinator, but when the teams assembled for final assignments, a problem became clear. "I should do it," Dr. Park argued. "I understand the theoretical physics better than anyone else." Taemin shook his head. "The modifications are based on my engineering designs. If something goes wrong with the hardware, I'm the only one who can fix it quickly enough." Dr. Choi stepped forward. "Medical knowledge might be crucial if someone gets injured during the sequence. What if the coordination team suffers radiation poisoning, but needs to continue the activation?" Velnara found herself joining the discussion. "My species has natural resistance to gravitational distortion effects. I would be more likely to survive the activation process." Commander Kim looked around at his team with something that might have been pride or despair. "You're all volunteering to die," he said quietly. "We're volunteering to try," Dr. Park corrected. "There's a difference." In the end, they decided to share the risk. Each reactor station would have multiple coordinators working together, hoping that if some fell, others could continue the sequence. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a human solution. Nobody left behind, everyone sharing the burden. As they made final preparations, Velnara found herself working alongside humans in ways that would have been unimaginable when she first arrived. Her 3-fingered hands operated control panels, beside human fingers. Her analytical mind worked with human intuition to solve problems that had no theoretical solutions. She was no longer an outside observer. She was part of the team. The night before the activation, Wu Jin established final communications with all 12 research stations. The reports were mixed. Some facilities had completed their modifications successfully. Others were struggling with technical problems. A few had lost key personnel to equipment failures during testing. Station 6 had a reactor accident during calibration, Wu Jin reported during the final briefing. 3 people dead, 5 injured. But they're still planning to participate in the activation sequence. Station 11 lost their primary physicist to radiation poisoning, added Dr. Park. Their backup coordinator is a geologist with limited experience in gravitational mechanics. Commander Kim absorbed these reports with grim determination. How many stations are fully operational? 7 out of 12 are operating at optimal capacity. 3 are partially functional. 2 are operating with skeleton crews and makeshift equipment. Dr. Park ran calculations on her datapad. We need at least 10 stations to create a gravity well strong enough to deflect the swarm. 7 optimal stations plus 3 partial stations might be enough, if everything works perfectly. And if everything doesn't work perfectly? Yunji asked. Then we fail, and everyone on this planet dies. The room was quiet as people absorbed this information. They were attempting something that required near-perfect execution across 12 different facilities with equipment pushed beyond safe limits, operated by volunteers who had weeks rather than years of training. Yet Velnara saw no despair in their faces. Fear, yes. Uncertainty, certainly, but also determination that seemed to grow stronger as their situation became more desperate. That evening, as the void swarm became visible as a dark mass blocking out stars, the humans gathered for what might be their final meal together. The dining hall felt strange with only 200 people, but those present filled it with quiet conversation and gentle laughter. Children who had been too young for the evacuation ships played games between the tables while adults discussed everything, except the coming morning. Art, music, memories of Earth, plans for crops they might plant if they survived. Normal human topics, as if the most important thing was to remain human until the very end. Dr. Choi approached Velnara's table carrying a small wrapped package. "We wanted to give you something," she said, setting the package down gently. Velnara unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small sculpture made from local stone. It depicted a flowering plant similar to the one in her quarters, but carved with intricate detail that showed both the visible petals and the hidden root system beneath. "Hyunsu made it," Dr. Choi explained. "He said you taught him that some things are beautiful just because they exist, not because they serve a purpose." Velnara held the sculpture in her hands, feeling the smooth stone warm under her touch. "I did not teach him that. I learned it from observing all of you. Maybe we taught each other," Dr. Choi said with a smile. As the evening wound down, Commander Kim stood to address the group one final time. "Tomorrow we attempt something that has never been tried before. We might succeed. We might fail. But whatever happens, I want you all to know that serving with you has been the greatest honor of my life." He paused, looking out over the faces of his people. "When I think about what makes humans special, it's not our technology or our intelligence, or our adaptability. It's our ability to choose hope when logic says to despair. It's our willingness to stand together when everything tells us to run apart." Dr. Park stood and raised her water glass. "To standing together." "To standing together," the room responded, and Velnara found herself speaking the words along with everyone else. Later that night, as she sat in her quarters holding the stone sculpture, Velnara realized she was no longer thinking like a Catherian. She was no longer analyzing behavior patterns or cultural structures. She was simply a person who cared about other people, preparing to face an impossible challenge alongside her friends. The communication device in her quarters chimed with another message from Catherian High Command. This time, the tone was different. "Analyst, Velnara. Your failure to report for evacuation constitutes abandonment of duty and violation of scientific protocols. You will be subject to formal discipline upon your return. However, your recent research submissions have been reviewed by the Behavioral Analysis Committee. If you survive the coming crisis, your observations about human cooperation patterns may warrant further study. Document everything." She deleted this message as well. Outside her window, the void swarm filled a quarter of the night sky, a darkness so complete it seemed to devour light itself. In just a few hours, it would reach their system. But inside Harmony Base, humans slept peacefully in their beds, preparing for a morning that would either see them trio what we learn by standing together. The activation began at dawn. Velnara stood in Harmony Base's reactor chamber alongside Commander Kim, Dr. Park, and Tae-min. Around them, the massive fusion reactor hummed with barely contained energy, its surface alive with warning lights and monitoring displays. Similar scenes were playing out at 11 other research stations across the planet. "All stations report ready." Wu Jin's voice crackled through the communication system from the control room above. Synchronization countdown begins in 60 seconds. Dr. Park checked her calculations one final time. Gravitational field generators are calibrated. Power levels are stable. Harmonic frequencies are locked in. Taman monitored the reactor modifications he had spent weeks perfecting. Reactor output is at 125% of safe operating parameters and rising. All systems are functioning within acceptable stress limits. Commander Kim coordinated with the other stations through his communication headset. Station 3 reports minor fluctuations in their field generators. Station 7 has lost backup power, but is continuing on primary systems. Velnara watched the gravitational monitoring equipment, her Catherian senses detecting distortions in space-time that the human instruments could barely measure. Gravitational fields are building according to theoretical projections. Interference. Patterns are within expected parameters. Through the thick windows of the reactor chamber, she could see the void swarm filling half the sky, a darkness so complete it seemed to consume reality itself, moving inexorably toward their small planet. 30 seconds to activation, Wujin announced. Velnara felt the gravitational forces beginning to affect her body. Her silver skin tingled with the sensation of space-time bending around them. The humans showed no sign of discomfort yet, but she knew that would change quickly once the fields reached full strength. 15 seconds. All stations confirm ready status. Dr. Park reached out and squeezed Velnara's hand with her own. Whatever happens, thank you for staying with us. 10 seconds. Commander Kim's voice was steady and calm. It has been an honor, serving with all of you. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Activate. The universe exploded around them. 12 fusion reactors across the planet simultaneously pushed their output to 150% of maximum safe capacity. 12 gravitational field generators created massive distortions in space-time. The combined effect was like nothing any of them had experienced before. Velnara felt the gravitational forces tear at her body as reality twisted around them. The human monitoring equipment screamed warnings as power levels exceeded every safety protocol. Through the communication system, she could hear similar chaos at the other stations. Station 4 reports reactor overload, someone shouted over the noise. They're attempting emergency shutdown. Station 11 has lost primary power, switching to backup systems. Station 6 is experiencing gravitational shear, multiple casualties reported. But the plan was working. On the main display screen, Velnara could see the combined gravitational fields creating exactly the effect Dr. Park had predicted. A massive gravity well was forming, its influence reaching out into space toward the approaching void swarm. Field strength at 60% of target, Dr. Park reported, her voice strained as the gravitational forces affected her human physiology. We need to maintain this for 18 minutes to achieve deflection. 18 minutes seemed impossible. Already Taman was showing signs of gravitational sickness, his face pale and his hands shaking as he worked the reactor controls. Commander Kim was bleeding from his nose, a sign that the distortion fields were affecting his inner ear and blood pressure. Station 2 is down, Wujin reported. Reactor failure, they're evacuating. Station 9 reports critical damage to their field generators. They're trying to compensate with increased power output. The numbers on Velnara's displays showed their plan balanced on the edge of disaster. They needed at least 10 stations to maintain the gravity well, and they were losing facilities one by one. But the humans did not give up. At Station 3, a team of volunteers manually held damaged field generators in position, while gravitational forces tried to tear them apart. At Station 7, engineers rerouted power through backup systems that were never designed to handle such loads. At Station 11, Dr. Choi's medical teams worked in the reactor chambers themselves, providing emergency treatment to personnel who collapsed at their posts. 12 minutes remaining, Dr. Park announced. Velnara could see the effect their gravity well was having on the void swarm. The massive destructive force was beginning to curve away from its original trajectory, pulled sideways by their artificial gravity field. The deflection was slight, but it was working. Station 5 is down. Reactor explosion, no survivors. Station 8 reports field generator failure. They're attempting repairs under power. They were losing too many stations. The gravity well was weakening, and the void swarm's trajectory was starting to straighten again. Then something remarkable happened. Station 12 is increasing power output, Wu Jin reported with surprise in his voice. They're pushing their reactor to 200% capacity. That will destroy their facility, Dr. Park said. They know. They're doing it anyway. One by one, the remaining stations began pushing their reactors beyond any conceivable safety limit. Engineers who knew they were signing their own death warrants chose to sacrifice themselves and their facilities to maintain the gravity well for the crucial final minutes. Station 7 is at 180% power. Station 3 is at 175%. Station 11 is at 190%. At Harmony Base, Taimin looked at his own reactor controls. Blood was running from his ears and his hands could barely grip the control interfaces, but his voice was clear and determined. Commander, request permission to increase our power. Output to 200%. Kim nodded without hesitation. Permission granted. Taimin, that will kill us all, Dr. Park protested. Maybe, he replied, already working the controls. But it will also save everyone else on this planet. The final 6 minutes felt like hours. The reactor chamber filled with the screams of overstressed machinery and the groans of metal being torn apart by forces it was never meant to contain. The gravitational distortions became so severe that Velnara could see space-time visibly warping around them. But the gravity well held. On the main display, the void swarm's trajectory curved away from their planet, deflected by the combined sacrifice of hundreds of humans across 12 research stations. The massive destructive force that had seemed unstoppable was being turned aside by the determination of people who refused to surrender. Deflection successful, Dr. Park announced, her voice barely audible over the chaos. The swarm will miss our system. All stations begin emergency shutdown, Commander Kim ordered. But many of the stations could not shut down. Their reactors had been pushed so far beyond safe limits that they could only burn themselves out completely. Across the planet, facilities that had operated for years exploded in brilliant flashes of light as their fusion cores finally collapsed. At Harmony Base, Taimin managed to execute a controlled shutdown just as their reactor reached the point of no return. The gravitational fields collapsed, the screaming machinery fell silent, and the four of them stood in the sudden quiet, hardly believing they were still alive. Station count, Commander Kim called to Wu Jin. The response was sobering. Harmony, base operational. Station 3 operational. Station 11 operational. All other stations have been destroyed or abandoned. Of the 12 research stations that had participated in the gravity well plan, only 3 had survived. Nearly 400 people had died to save the 4,800 who lived, but they had succeeded. The void swarm continued its path away from their system, deflected by 18 minutes of impossible courage and sacrifice. In the days that followed, rescue ships arrived from other Confederation systems. Medical teams treated the survivors. Engineers assessed the damage. Investigators tried to understand how such an unlikely plan had actually worked. But Velnara was focused on something else entirely. She was writing her final report to the Galactic Confederation, and for the first time in her career, she was not trying to maintain scientific objectivity. I was wrong about the nature of courage, she wrote. I believed courage was facing danger for logical reasons: survival, territory, resources, genetic continuation. I observed 17 species before encountering humans, and I thought I understood the full spectrum of brave behavior. Humans taught me that true courage is not logical. It is not about being unafraid. It is about choosing to stand with others when everything rational says to run. It is about deciding that some things are worth fighting for, even when fighting seems pointless. The humans at these research stations did not cooperate because they were weak and needed each other for survival. They cooperated because they were strong enough to trust each other with their lives. They sacrificed themselves not because their individual lives had no value, but because they valued the lives of others more than their own survival. I recommend immediate full membership in the Galactic Confederation for the human species. Not because they need our guidance or protection, but because we need them to remind us of something we have forgotten. We need them to teach us what it means to hope when logic says to despair, to choose unity when